You're not gonna need a part 2. The story is, this guy went to a Six Flags on a school trip, and he ended up hopping a fence to grab some lady's glasses. Security guards caught him doing this, and since hopping the fence at amusement parks is a very dangerous thing, people have legit gotten decapitated and electrocuted doing this. The security guards had no choice other than banning him. Let this be a lesson. Don't hop the fence at an amusement park. And with that being said, you're not going to need a part 2.
To lend a student a pen during an exam, so afterwards the student decided he would destroy that man's career.
You're not going to need a part 2. Basically, there was a college student who already knew what he needed to know for the class he was taking, so he didn't really pay attention. The professor would always try to catch him off guard, but since the student already knew the answers, it never really worked. So when the student ran out of ink during his final exam, the teacher just ignored him. He was able to get a new pen from another employee in the room, however, now he was dead set on ruining that teacher. That's when he decided to go through the teacher's Facebook feed. While he didn't find anything incriminating there, he did find the teacher's personal email. He searched the internet for places he'd used his personal email, and he ended up finding something really bad. He found out one of the forums the teacher was on was actually a forum to find prostitutes. He contacted a local news agency, and they were able to publish the story. Controversy began to surround the teacher, and other people began talking about strange experiences they'd had with him. By the time they got back to school for the next semester, the teacher was gone. And now you don't need a part 2.
I can't believe what happened to this man that was bit by the most venomous snakes in the world every day for 30 years.
You're not going to need a part 2. When musician Steve Ludwin was 17, he became interested in injecting himself with snake venom. When he finally decided to do it a few years later, it went very badly for him, and it almost ended up giving him permanent injuries. When he finally healed, he didn't stop, because for the next 30 years, he was injecting himself with snake venoms almost every day. During that time period, he became immune to the venom and started using it for medicinal purposes. He claims that the venom has kept him from getting sick for almost a decade. He also claims that cobra venom specifically gives him better endurance. I wouldn't recommend doing this yourself, but now you don't need a part 2.
This teacher gave the hardest exams to her students on purpose so that they would fail, but then one student did something so smart that he shocked his entire class.
You're not going to need a part 2. So basically, there was a high school physics teacher who was infamous at her school for failing almost half the class during the final exams every year. One of the students in her class named John was the type of student who would try to finesse his way through every class he took. Her exams were not open note, and cell phones were taken up at the beginning of class, so he decided to use the fact that calculators were allowed to his advantage. John decided to write all of his formulas on the back of his calculator, so he wouldn't have to remember any of them during the test. This worked. The teacher didn't check the back of the calculators, and he managed to get 100 on the test. He probably should have came up with a new idea for his second exam. However, he didn't, and he managed to get himself caught. But now you're not going to need a part 2.
A teacher kept insulting her students in class for 10 years until one of the students finally had enough and
You're not going to need a part 2. Basically, there was an algebra teacher at this high school who'd been relentlessly insulting the students in her classes for years. The administrators at this high school never caught on to this because the teacher was very good at hiding this. One day, one of the seniors in her class decided that they had had enough and decided to buy a recorder and bring it to school so they can record the teacher's insults. After a month of recording, the student caught the teacher telling them that a question they had asked was the dumbest thing they'd heard in 10 years. After that insult, the student left school and compiled all of the insults they had captured over the course of the month and compiled them into one recording. The student then showed the recording to the administrators, and the administrators were disgusted. The student then left the office, saw the teacher, smiled at them, and never saw them again. So there you go. Now you don't need a part 2.
This man proposed to this woman, but when she saw the ring, she murdered him.
You're not going to need a part 2. So basically, there was this couple in the country of Mauritius who fell in love very quickly, moving in with each other only after 2 months. After some time passed, the woman noticed that the man was withholding information about his past and avoiding her family. Despite that, the man proposed to her in front of her family on their 1-year anniversary. This is when the woman noticed something was very wrong and she decided to run off. It turned out the ring was actually her little sister's ring that had been stolen in a robbery that resulted in her death. The woman then invited him over one last time, poisoned his drink, and killed him. And now you're not going to need a part 2.
You won't believe what happened to this boy who is exposing famous celebrities online.
You're not going to need a part 2. Basically, at the age of 12, this guy, Eric Taylor, decided to start hacking in video games. That got too easy for him, so he decided he was going to hack into big companies and he was going to shut down the servers of big social media platforms. Since he managed to do all that without getting caught, he decided he was going to start exposing celebrities. Some of the big names he exposed were Kim Kardashian, Tiger Woods, and Donald Trump. After this, he made a big mistake and started trying to swat people, because this made the FBI really want to catch him. The FBI eventually caught him, and he got sentenced to a 6-year probation which banned him from the internet. He eventually apologized to everybody exposed, and now he works for a cybersecurity company keeping people safe on the internet. If you want to stay safe on the internet, you're probably going to need a VPN. And luckily for you, I have one that I've been using for years, linked in my bio. And now, you're not going to need a part 2.
This driver gets a strange feeling about a boy on his bus until he looks down at his feet and sees it.
You're not going to need a part 2. Basically, a bus driver was driving his normal route when a man and a crying boy got onto his bus. He thought nothing of it at first, thinking that the kid was just having a temper tantrum, but he began to get suspicious of the man telling the kid to be quiet. This is when the bus driver got an emergency notification about a young boy who had just been kidnapped nearby. The alert said that the young boy was wearing plaid shorts and red shoes, so he decided to stop the bus and discreetly check if the boy matched the description. He told the passengers that there might have been a missing backpack on the bus while he went back to check the boy. The boy matched the description, so the bus driver went to the front of the bus and made a secret 911 call. The police told him to drive slowly to his next bus stop so that they could catch up. He was able to drive slowly without raising suspicion, so that when he got to the next stop, the cops were already there, and they made the arrest and saved the boy. And now, you're not going to need a part 2.
This girl did not look in the mirror for 12 years until something happened.
You're not going to need a part 2. So basically, there was this girl named Caroline who was constantly bullied about her weight when she was growing up. Unfortunately, because of this, Caroline grew up disliking herself, so she decided that she was never going to look into a mirror. Even when she got to high school, she never really had the confidence to go out, so she just stayed in her room most of the time. So when prom was approaching, she thought nothing would come out of it, but she got a surprise that would change her life. A boy that she'd had a crush on for years decided to ask her out for prom. In that instant, Caroline's self-confidence skyrocketed, and she ended up going to prom with him. And now, you don't need a part 2.
This boy visited this graveyard every day, and when his parents found out why, they got rid of him.
You're not going to need a part 2. Basically, every day after school, this kid would tell his parents he was going to his friend's house. His parents were close to the friend's family, so when they asked him about the son's daily visits, they said they hadn't seen him. When his mom found out about this, she decided to follow him to wherever he was going. She followed him to a graveyard, where she found him digging a grave about the son's size. The mom thought her son might be possessed, so she sent him to a witch doctor for treatment. Nothing the witch doctor did worked. However, the son finally decided to admit why he was digging the grave. It turned out he was being bullied by an older kid at the school. Infuriated by this, the parents ended up contacting the school, and the school suspended the bully. And now you don't need a part 2.
This man spent a week in darkness and you won't believe what happens.
You're not going to need a part 2, even if you never posted it. So basically, the YouTuber Disrupt decided he was going to live stream himself living in complete darkness for the first week of 2020. I actually recommend watching the full YouTube video, but if you don't want to sit down for 13 minutes, here's a quick summary. While he was living in darkness, he had 3 rooms: a room to sleep and eat in, a room to exercise in, and a bathroom. While he spent most of his time sleeping, meditating, and coming up with alternate realities, there were a few interesting things that happened to him. During the beginning, one of his office neighbors accidentally walked in because he didn't know about the stream. Around halfway through, he had to blindfold himself and fix his Wi-Fi because the stream went down. And let's not forget about the time that a mouse made a special appearance in the stream. And finally, after 155 hours, he was able to see the light of day again. I'm actually going to do what he did and donate any money I make from this video to the Atlanta Children's Shelter. I also put the link to donate in my bio. And now, you're not going to need a part 2.
This woman wanted her boyfriend out of prison so bad, you won't believe what she did.
You're not going to need a part 2. Basically, there's a young couple who fall in love and have a child together. But the boyfriend wasn't hanging out in the right crowd and got arrested. His girlfriend was watching a movie and got the idea to help him escape using a suitcase. She was able to get him into the suitcase and pass 2 security checkpoints, but the suitcase got too heavy for her and she dropped it. Since the security guards knew that she was there to drop stuff off for him, they began to get suspicious since the suitcase was heavy. The security guards decided to check, and lo and behold, the man is in the suitcase. And now they're both living happily ever after in jail. And you can be happy too, since you don't need to watch a part 2.
This homeless man sat in the same spot for 3 years until one woman changes his life forever.
You're not going to need a part two.
And we're today's guest host, Party Shirt Baby.
So in the Houston, Texas area, a woman named Ginger came across a homeless man who would wait at the interstate every day for over a year.
So after Ginger spoke to the man, she found out his name, which was Victor. He was 32 years old, and he suffered from mental illness, and he was severely malnourished. Victor hadn't spoken to anyone for 3 years, so Ginger would go during her lunch breaks just to go conversate and catch up with him.
Eventually, Ginger started a Facebook page called This Is Victor and started a GoFundMe that raised over $26,000 for Victor, but he was still incomplete. He was missing his mum.
So after many pleas of reaching out on social media, Victor's uncle actually found a story. And so he reached out to Ginger, and they actually reunited Victor with his mother.
Thank you, Party Shirt, and now you're not gonna need a part two.
This woman calls cops on a little girl for selling water and you won't believe what happened next.
You're not gonna need a part two. So basically, this girl, Jordan Rogers, decided to sell water bottles to baseball fans heading to a game during a heat wave. That was until this woman decided to call the cops because the 8-year-old did not have a permit. Luckily for Jordan, her older cousin was there to film the incident and film this video.
This woman don't want to let a little girl sell some water. She calling police on an 8-year-old little girl. You can hide all you want. The whole world gonna see you, boo.
The video of the incident went viral, getting 10 million views on Twitter alone. The woman who called the cops, Allison Edel, was mocked online for days. And then, the internet even found out that she was the CEO of a company called Treatwell Health. Once the internet found out Allison was a CEO, she was basically forced to resign, and now she lives off the grid. And now, you're not gonna need a part two.
This mom offered a homeless man pizza but is shocked to find out who he really is.
You're not gonna need a part two. Basically, there was this woman who's on vacation in New York City. One day while she was on vacation, she decided to go eat pizza at a restaurant near her hotel. She noticed a homeless man outside of the restaurant and decided to give him her leftovers before she went back to her hotel. A few days went by, and then she noticed a picture of herself giving the man the pizza on the newspaper. It turns out, the homeless man was actually actor Richard Gere getting ready for a role where he plays a homeless man. And there you have it. Now you don't need a part two.
This is one of the biggest plot twists to ever occur in real life.
This video is for the 24.5 million people who didn't watch the part two. Basically, Nicholas Barclay disappeared in 1994 after playing a basketball game with his friends. 3 years later, someone claiming to be the boy was found, and they threw a huge family reunion. However, something was off, and the family eventually noticed. When the boy disappeared, he had blonde hair and blue eyes. However, when he returned, he had brown hair and brown eyes, and a French accent. When confronted about this, he claimed that he'd been taken to Europe, had his hair dyed, and had chemicals change his eye color. Family apparently believed this, and they allowed him to stay. It was until 6 months later when the FBI decided to get involved and found out Nicholas wasn't actually Nicholas. The FBI used fingerprints and blood samples to find out that Nicholas was actually Frederick Pierre, a Frenchman well known for trying to pose as other people. Frederick was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but unfortunately, the whereabouts of the real Nicholas have yet to be discovered. And now you don't need a part two.
This police officer pulled over a man on the highway and is brought to tears by their interaction.
You're not gonna need a part two. So basically, there was a guy named William who always wanted to go into the US military. In 2003, this came true when he was deployed into the active war zone in Iraq. Unfortunately, during his 15-month deployment, he ended up experiencing some things that nobody should ever experience, and he developed PTSD as a result. When he got home from the war, he ended up having to take therapy for his PTSD and anxiety that he developed while he was there. One day, while he was driving home from therapy, he ended up getting tailed by a police officer and got pulled over. He was nervous and he thought he was being pulled over for speeding, but the officer pulled him over for a different reason. The officer had actually pulled him over because he noticed that he was a veteran due to his bumper sticker, and he wanted to talk to him. They ended up talking, and it turns out that the police officer's son had also gone to Iraq, but unfortunately he never came home. William got out of his car and embraced the officer, and they both ended up breaking down. And now, you're not going to need a part two.
Walk across it, climb up this hill, and explore the bunker.
You don't need a part 2 through 5. Here's what happens. Basically, the explorer dudes decide to walk across a beach and climb up a mountain, which they didn't need to, because there's a whole path going up to the bunker that they show at the beginning. Basically, the whole story is them walking up the hill, finding a way into the bunker, and then getting into the bunker and walking around. They try to add a little bit of intrigue by saying something smells dead in there, but it's like obviously a bunch of beer bottles and stuff just laying around. It's probably just some squatters and they smell bad. Then another group of people show up, presumably from the easier trail, and then they walk out. Probably the most exciting thing from the series is one of them takes like a 6-foot fall, but it's like nothing. They land on their feet, and they're completely fine. So yeah, now you don't need a part 2.
I was in 7th grade, a kid in my class actually got caught watching anime porn.
You're not gonna need a part 2. According to him, there's this kid at this guy's school who would regularly come to school wearing anime cosplay. They were also the type of person to sit in the back of class and wear headphones all day, hiding what they were doing. One day, while they were in class, this kid forgot to plug his headphones in. And pretty much everybody in this class was able to hear exactly what this guy was talking about at the beginning of the video. So I guess the moral of the story is, don't forget to wear your headphones. And now, you're not gonna need a part 2.
This woman bought a homeless person some food. A minute later, he gave her a note that made her cry.
You're not gonna need a part 2. Basically, this lady saw a homeless man outside of a cafe she was eating at and decided she was going to get a meal with him. As they're eating together, this guy decides to give this lady his life story. He talked about how he was abused and mocked for his appearance and how his dog had just died of old age. After they had finished the meal, the man decided he was going to write her a note. In the note, the man said that he was planning on taking his life soon, and that the lady had saved his life by having that meal with him. There you go. Now you don't need a part 2.
So we found these bones and we're not sure what they are at Tropical. We're gonna see what they are.
You're not gonna need a part 2. Basically, the story goes like this. 3 weeks before that video was taken, one of the employees at the Tropical Smoothie found the bones next to a dumpster at the Tropical Smoothie. They didn't report them because they had no clue what they were. Eventually, everybody finds out about this, and they decide to call the non-emergency police number. They called the non-emergency number because a few weeks beforehand, there was a murder a couple towns over. A few officers show up and decide to look at the security camera footage at the Verizon next door. But since the Verizon deletes their security camera footage, they couldn't get anything from it. From what the cops told the original poster, they do believe that these might be human bones. So the cops took them away to a lab for testing. And that's where the story ends for now. I checked local news articles, but I didn't see anything about the bones. So there you go. Now you don't need a part 2.
An entire minifigure submerged inside of this. You're going to have to check me out for part 2.
You're not going to need a part 2. If you put a Lego figure into acetone, then the Lego figure will melt. In his part 2, he put a Lego figure into acetone for 15 minutes, and it had pretty much already melted through. Like this. And now you don't even need the part 2.
Family bought a dog, but when the vet saw it, he called the police.
You're not going to need a part 2. Basically, a Chinese family was on vacation when they found a litter of puppies being sold on the street. According to the seller, the puppies were supposed to be Tibetan Mastiffs, which can grow to be huge in size. Just like the family expected, their new pet started getting very large. However, there were a few things they did not expect. One time, a family member noticed that the dog was standing on its hind legs for a very long time. The family also noted that they'd never heard the dog bark and that the growls sounded more like roars. 2 years after getting the pet, the mother of the family finally decided to see what was wrong with the dog. She decided to post a picture of her pet on an internet forum, and a vet on the forum figured out that their dog was actually an Asiatic black bear. The vet had to call the police and a wildlife protection agency so they can get their pet bear to a safer place. And now you're not going to need a part 2.
This old man was so mean to this waitress that you won't believe what he did.
You're not going to need a part 2. Basically, there was an old man who was a common guest at this cafe. However, he always complained about the coffee, food, and waiters. It got to the point where only one of the waitresses even had the nerve to serve him. The waitress, Melina, always tried to be nice to him because she knew that he was a war vet who had lost his wife. After years of being a waitress, she noticed one day that the man had stopped coming into the cafe. She found out that the reason he had stopped coming is because he had unfortunately passed away. The day after she found out the unfortunate news, a man in a nice suit walked into the cafe. While at first she thought she was in trouble, it turned out that the old man had actually given her his house, his car, and $50,000. Even though the old man was so mean to the staff, he still loved the company that he had there. And now, you don't need a part 2.
A diver tapes his final moments at sea, and what happens next might scare you.
You're not going to need a part 2. So basically, this guy, Jacob Childs, was diving off the coast of Australia when he got separated from his diving team and was stranded. He had his GoPro with him, so he decided to film what could have possibly been his final moments. For the next 6 hours, the tides pushed him further and further away from where he was diving, making it more unlikely for him to be found. But right as the sun was setting and his hopes were fading, a plane flew over. As the plane flew over, it managed to spot this orange safety tube on his back, which allowed them to confirm his location and send a rescue team out to save him. Jacob was able to survive the ordeal unharmed, and now you're not going to need a part 2.
You know, I will never forget the time where my teacher knocked out my friend.
Well, now you'll get to hear about it without a part 2 through 4. When the teacher got to class, he explicitly stated that he was having a stressful day. Most people would respect this, but the storyteller's friend decides to start a conflict. When the teacher wasn't looking, the friend decided to throw a pencil at the back of this guy's head. The teacher did not know who threw it, but they suspected that the storyteller threw it since he had recently been suspended. Instead of confessing, the friend decides that he's going to instigate the teacher further by throwing a paper ball at the back of the teacher's head. This time, the teacher really thought that it was the storyteller, so he had to snitch on his friend because he did not want to get suspended again. Obviously, the teacher wasn't happy, but he let the day go on. Then the friend decided to push the limits way too far by throwing a hardcover textbook at the teacher. The teacher and the friend then got into a conflict that ended with the friend getting knocked out cold on the floor with a broken nose. Obviously, the teacher got fired, and now you don't need a part 2.
These two twins were so lazy that they were able to pull off something so insane you wouldn't believe it unless I told you.
You're not gonna need a part 2. So basically, these twins moved from their home to Washington, where nobody knew them. Since nobody knew them, they decided they were gonna do something crazy and switch off going to school every day since nobody knew that they were twins. This worked for a while, but one girl at the school started to notice their slightly different personalities and started getting suspicious. The girl decided to ask the boys questions and then quiz them on them the next day, but the boys knew what was up, so they coordinated their answers to make sure she wouldn't find out. This eventually got the girl off their case. However, one of the boys broke their arm, throwing a wrench in their plan. Both of the twins were too lazy to go to school by themselves, and that's when the girl found out that they were actually twins. And now, you're not going to need a part 2.